Messaging isn't as simple as getting a simple framework, going through a process, or doing an exercise. Messaging is something that is always evolving, it's always growing, and it's always changing. Now, after working with over 1,000 different students and clients and doing this for ourselves, we started to realize there's actually 6 different levels of your messaging evolvement. And understanding what level you're at is key to developing and growing your messaging to a level that most can't compete with. So what we're going to do is give you the overview of what those levels are today in this episode. And then we have a series following up this episode, diving into each level and showing you how to get out of it. So if that's interesting to you, well, then keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. And today, to no surprise to you, hopefully, we're going to talk about messaging again. But I would assume that's why most of you guys are here, is because of our messaging philosophy and how we look at messaging and content and all of that good stuff. And today we're actually going to talk about something a little bit different. I call it the 6 stages of message evolvement. So there are 6 phases that people go through when creating their messaging. And I don't think a lot of people understand this. I think a lot of people, this is probably what's happened to you. If you're like struggling with your content, you're struggling with your messaging, your communication, what's probably happened is you've had a huge focus on content or styles of content or platforms. And what I mean by this is like, you're like, okay, I need to do a bunch of content, so I'm going to do a bunch of how-to. Okay, now the trend is that people are dancing and pointing in reels. So now I'm going to start dancing and pointing in reels. Or you start realizing, okay, like everyone's doing a podcast, so I'm going to do a podcast. And that is what I always refer to as like that masculine energy. It's very much like, here are the things that I need to go do. And so you're just chasing the things to go do. Like you think a certain type of content or a certain platform or certain like the trend is what's going to make the difference between you getting traction and not getting traction. And once people hit that zone, once people hit that plateau of like, okay, I've been doing this thing, I've been doing the same thing everyone else has been doing, and I'm still not seeing the results I want. Once you kind of hit that plateau, like it's not working, even though I'm doing, again, masculine energy, action, doing things that you need to like go implement. I'm doing all the things that people are told me to do, and I'm doing all the things that other people are doing, but it's not working. Once people hit that plateau, they then hop back into like, well, oh, it's the messaging. It's what I'm saying. It's not clear. People don't get it. I'm not attracting the right people, or I'm not creating demand, or no one's coming to my offer, or no one's showing up to my trainings, my events, my webinars. And you start realizing, oh, it's a messaging problem. And so what happens is that's usually phase 1 is you get to plateau. Phase 2 is like, or the next problem, I guess, that you face, or stage, I guess, is that you're like, okay, it's the messaging. And then after that, what happens is people go like, I just need to know what to say. Give me the framework, give me the process, give me the things to say. And that's still very masculine energy. Give me the things to do. The focus is now on messaging versus content, but we're still focusing on the things to go do. And people think that there's a magic key or a magic solution when it comes to messaging. If I just say something in this order, following this framework, following this language pattern, then everything's going to be fine and great. But that's not how messaging is. Messaging really is a lot of what I call that feminine energy. It's the invisible things. And you have to understand that messaging is something that evolves and it doesn't stop. It's kind of like your own personal growth. There is never an end to your personal growth. Your entire life, unless you're an enlightened being, which is pretty rare, like that doesn't really exist. There's probably a lot of people that think they're enlightened beings, but I have yet to see one. And so what I'm getting at is like, much like your personal growth, you can grow as much as you want, and you'll probably never get to the end of your internal growth as a human being. It's the same thing with messaging. What you start with won't be what you end with. but you do have to get started in order to get there. And then you have to continue trying and testing. And so when we have a lot of people come into the program, their focus really is on just going through the program once. Let me fix my messaging and then I'm good. But the problem is you're only going to be good for so long. You're only going to be good until you're not anymore. And so after working with over 1,000 students inside of our programs and tons of clients, I mean, we have probably produced millions and millions, and not probably, we have millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of views online between ourselves, our clients, and our students. Tens of thousands of shares, millions and millions of dollars worth of sales from our messaging and stuff. I've started to realize that there's actually 6 phases that people are going to go through when they're evolving their messaging. And again, you might find yourself, and I'm going to go through these 6 phases right now, today in this podcast episode, and you might realize you might be in between 2 levels, or you might find yourself a little bit in level 1 and also level 2. But the idea here is what I want you to do is to recognize where you're at, and then I want you to recognize where you want to go, which is going to be obviously level 6. And even at level 6, you're not going to stay there at level 6. And what I really want you to take away is that messaging is a living, breathing thing. It's constantly evolving. It does take testing. It takes implementing. It takes learning to perfect. And what I always say is the people that see the fastest results, the people that move quicker up through these phases, are the ones who focus on 2 things. They focus on, 1, evolvement. They understand that to get great messaging, you need to learn and test and try and tweak and adjust. But they also know that there has to be some level of a mastery over their craft. And if you don't have mastery yet, that's fine. Start focusing on that. Again, and mastery isn't experience necessarily. To me, all experience brings you, let me put it this way, all experience will guarantee you is failure, pain, suffering, mistakes. Experience will guarantee those things. If you go get experience, you will be guaranteed those, but it doesn't guarantee that you actually have the solution. Mastery is where the solution comes in. And when you have mastery, you don't just know one way to get to the solution. You know, like 10. You know the solution so well, and you know that the solution may change based on certain circumstances or individuals or whatever. That's what mastery is you know it so well, you know exactly what this person needs, how to get them there, and that path may not be the same for person A, B, or C. So let's go through these 6 phases. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a series of podcasts following up this episode, diving deeper into each phase and how to get out of each phase. So there's 6 phases. There's number 1, what I call the unheard entrepreneur. There's the seen entrepreneur. Then there's the heard entrepreneur. There's the traction entrepreneur. And then there's the in-demand entrepreneur. And the very last level is what I call new generation mastery. This is when you have achieved mastery. And that's the goal, and that's where we want to be at. Okay, so let's start with the unheard entrepreneur. So the unheard entrepreneur is where actually probably most of you guys might be. This is generally where new people are going to be sitting at. Like if you're just starting out, you're probably the first year or 2 inside of business. You're definitely probably underneath 100,000 in revenue a year. Maybe sometimes even under 250,000 a year. But basically the main problem here is that you can't get eyeballs on your content. So what I always say is there's a couple things that need to happen when we create content. Number 1, we need to get eyeballs on our content, right? Number 1 thing is we need eyeballs to stop the scroll, get eyeballs on us, get eyeballs on our content, get eyeballs on our ads, get eyeballs on our messaging. Second thing we need to keep the eyeballs there. So we can be very polarizing. We can get attention very easily, but it doesn't do us any good if we're clickbaity or it's a very polarizing headline, but there's no substance to the actual content, or we're not communicating to the subconscious mind. It doesn't matter. The people are leaving. So we need eyeballs on us. We need to keep the eyeballs on us. And then the third thing is we need to create demand for what we sell while the eyeballs are on us. Those are the 3 things we need. Okay. So if you're the unheard entrepreneur, you likely can't get the eyeballs on you. You're having a really hard time focusing or getting people to stop the scroll to even notice you. Like it's just not working. It's like crickets every time you put out a piece of content. Now, there could be a couple of reasons for this. And in our series that we're going to do, we will follow up with more details on how to get out of it and what causes it. But this is generally caused because you're doing like 70% or more of your content is how-to or educational content. And I believe that we should never do 100% or even 70% of one type of content. We need all sorts of different things. Like we all heard that in order to sell, you need the know, the like, and the trust, right? Like everyone says, just go get the know, like, and trust. But no one ever tells you how to get the know, like, and trust. Well, we get the know, the like, and the trust by using different forms of content. The connection content, which is based off of values and beliefs, that builds rapport. That's trust. When we do what to do content, that's when we start to become that authority. People know that we are the expert. They know that we know what we're talking about. And we do thought reversals. That's shifting of perspective. It's getting people to see things different. It's ending suffering for people. Those three types of content build the know, the like, and the trust. And it also builds demand. Okay. So if you're the unheard entrepreneur, you're probably focusing so much on one style of content, and it's likely how to educational. You're probably more focused on being an expert, like teaching your expertise. Like that's your main thing is like, I'm an expert. I'm going to teach my expertise. The problem is that you're still just an expert, and being an expert in a sea of experts isn't good enough anymore. And that's why you're not getting seen, because if you're just focusing on being an expert or even the best expert inside of your space, you're really only left teaching stuff that's already been taught. Like if you're an expert, you've just been in your space, you're probably regurgitating other people's information, you've probably been studying other people and what they do, and you're just repeating it back in content. And there's not really much of a original thought, or not original thought, but there's not really much to unique IP, intellectual property. You're not really doing anything differently. So that means your content is usually, if you're a weight loss coach, your content's titled like how to lose 10 pounds. And then expert A, B, C, D, and whatever are all, their content's all titled how to lose 10 pounds. So right now, especially because of COVID, there have been more experts and more people coming into the space at alarming rates. Like there are so many people that have online businesses got shut down, so they move online. And then there's also a huge amount of people that are now consuming content online more than before the pandemic. So this idea of consuming online content, putting out online content, like the awareness of it has gone through the roof. So yes, there's more competitors or more people there consuming stuff, but that also means that there are more competitors coming in at huge rates. So instead of looking at yourself as an expert in a sea of experts, we need you to look at yourself as that thought leader, the person that's changing the space or creating the space or taking a stand against things that are outdated. Okay. So again, unheard entrepreneurs level 1, and you basically just cannot get eyeballs on you. You're likely focusing a lot on one type of content. It's probably how to educational. You're focusing more on your expertise in being an expert versus a thought leader. The next level after that is what I call the scene entrepreneur. This is when you're actually getting eyeballs on you, but nothing else. Like you're getting views. So people are seeing your content, and whether maybe you're using through play campaigns or not, but you're actually getting seen, but you're not really getting much more than that. Like you might be getting a like here and there, a comment here and there, but the engagement from the content is really lacking. And even if you are getting engagement, it's not turning into sales. Like you're still having a major sales problem if you're the scene entrepreneur. So the result of this is usually comes, or when you move into this phase, it usually comes from an awareness of like, oh my gosh, I've been stuck in this like content circle of death. I've been stuck as the unheard entrepreneur who's focusing a ton on how-to content. Now you're doing something a little bit differently. Maybe you've listened to my podcast and you're like, okay, I need to do a thought reversal. Maybe you've watched our free YouTube video on what a thought reversal is. You've given it a try. You're a little bit more polarizing. Your titles are a little bit different now, but you still haven't mastered the art of communication. You haven't mastered the art of communicating to the subconscious mind, which by the way is a huge focus within our new program that's coming out, is communication to the subconscious mind. You know, like when you read a good book, you don't logically think, okay, is the book good? Is it bad? I don't know. You just go like instantly, automatically go, this book is so good. Why? Because the book communicates to the subconscious mind. Usually the scene entrepreneur hasn't mastered or perfected or even really worked on their communication. They've just been focusing on shifting the types of content they're doing, the titles of the content, and maybe they're not doing so much how-to, and they've started to incorporate some thought reversals and connections. The idea here is if you're the scene entrepreneur, you're definitely getting traction. You might be stopping the scroll, but that's about it. Like, sales are still a problem, engagement's still a problem, people opting into your list is still a problem. And you're generally still going to be under $100,000 a year at this level. Sometimes even a $250 a year will still be at the scene entrepreneur level. But the level above that is what I call the traction entrepreneur. So the traction entrepreneur, the herd entrepreneur. There we go. So we go unheard entrepreneur, the scene entrepreneur, and now we are the herd entrepreneur. The herd entrepreneur is getting eyeballs on you, and you are keeping the eyeballs on you, and you are getting engagement. But the sales aren't there. So there's this massive disconnect between what you're seeing at the top of the funnel. There's a massive disconnect between what's happening on your content and what's happening to your sales. Again, a lot of people think engagement equals sales, followers equals sales, likes will equal sales, and they don't. So there's a lot of people that could be herd entrepreneurs, but you're herd entrepreneurs because you're like being entertaining. You are being a little polarizing. You do have a really good message. You might be more of an influencer than a thought leader, which, by the way, just because you're an influencer doesn't mean you're a thought leader. But yes, thought leaders can be influencers and are influencers. But the thing is like, again, you can be an influencer, you can be an entertainer, you could just be super polarizing, and you could just have a great message. But if you're not keeping sales in mind, if you're not being intentional with creating demand, then it does you absolutely no good. This is why we have influencers with 1 million followers, but still have to go work a full-time job because they're not making any money off of their following. So the herd entrepreneurs is exactly that. They are herd, but they're broke. They're not making any money. So you're definitely under $250,000 a year at this level. And it might be frustrating because you're probably experiencing like people not showing up to your webinars. You feel like you delivered really great webinar with great information. You know, people are engaging with your top of funnel content, but it's not translating to sales and you're just confused. You're herd, but you're broke. You're herd, but you're stuck under $250,000 a year. So the other part of that too is if you're the herd entrepreneur, you might be making sales, but it's definitely not consistent. It's not reliable. You really don't know. Like 1 month might be 5,000, the next month might be 15, then you're back down to 3, then you're up because there's no consistency in what you're doing. There's no consistent flow. When our messaging is dialed in, there should be a flow. There should be consistency in your sales. You should relatively understand your numbers. But it's kind of like the sales that do come in are hit, miss, they come in floods, then they don't come in at all. There's no system or process around or messaging around creating demand. But then when we graduate from that, when we start to focus on how to create demand, how to create subconscious demand, how to improve our messaging sales-wise inside of our funnel, we graduate to the traction entrepreneur. Okay, so this is, you're getting eyeballs on you, you're keeping the eyeballs on you, and you do have consistent sales, but they're not scalable. So the traction entrepreneur is a good place to be because it means things are working. It means that your messaging is kind of dialed in. You understand how to create demand. You're not really at the top of your game yet, but you're there. You're likely at like $200,000 a year in revenue to like maybe 500,000 is generally where most of the traction entrepreneurs will be. Again, there's no scaling. It's like month after month after month, your audience isn't growing, your list isn't growing, and your sales aren't growing, at least not significantly. Like you might see a little growth here, a little growth there, a little whatever, but it's not like you have a fire and all you need to do is just add more fuel to the fire and the fire gets bigger. That's not really what's going on. You just have a fire that just kind of stays the same. And even if you throw like another log on it, the fire just keeps staying the same. And that's because you haven't got to the level of scaling. And what's usually stopping the scaling problem is a lack of deepness inside of the messaging. And you're still kind of like stuck in between like this expert. You're still kind of like in the expert phase, but people just really like you. Like they like you, they connect with you really well. You're good at building connection with people, but you haven't really made yourself so different inside the space that people go like, this person's changing the game. So the traction entrepreneur is usually relying more on connection with their audience. Like maybe you're leaning into who you really are. You're leaning into what you believe, and people connect with that, but you haven't fully bridged the gap from building that connection and turning that connection into something that also people go like, I need this and I need it now. People may really like you. They attend their webinar. They're like, yeah, I think I'll get in and work with this person, but they're not like knocking down your door to go work with you. Because when you have that, that's when scaling becomes easier. Your messaging is so dialed in that cold traffic, and that's the other thing too, is the traction entrepreneur probably hasn't mastered the art of converting cold traffic. When you can convert cold traffic with your ads, especially into like a high ticket program, that's when you know your messaging is like on fire. And you just haven't really hit that yet if you're a traction entrepreneur. Now, the fifth level is what I call the in-demand entrepreneur. The in-demand entrepreneur is someone that is scaling their sales consistently. You actually have people coming to you for your expertise. Like they're hunting you down, like they're knocking the door down. They're DMing you, how do I work with you? You usually will have a good understanding of your messaging. You are usually like the top 1, 2, or 3 expert inside of your space. You're probably close to $1 million business, if not more at this point. And it may seem like things are going really well. Like you're in demand. People are coming in. People want to work with you, but you're still missing something. And it's a very slight thing. And I didn't realize that this was even a thing to even keep an eye out for until it started happening to me, is that people stop coming when you're in the in-demand entrepreneur phase, which by the way is the second highest one. Like there's one more level after this, but when you're in the in-demand entrepreneur, people are coming to you for your expertise. They are not coming to you because of your work. And I didn't realize this was even a thing until people started telling me like, I just love your work. The approach that you take is so different. You're teaching something that people haven't taught before. You're talking about things that people have never talked about before. You're talking about things that I've never heard before. I love your work. And when people say, I love your work, what they're really saying is you have such a different approach to what you do that I know there is a level of mastery that you have because you're creating something brand spanking new. I've never heard it before. I've never seen it before. That is your work. You're actually working on building something versus regurgitating expertise. And again, there's nothing wrong with regurgitating expertise, but when you regurgitate expertise, you are still an expert in a sea of experts. The in-demand entrepreneur is probably doing pretty well. I think of Bob Helig, who's been on our podcast and who we worked with over the years. And he was stuck at a $2 million business, I think for 2 or 3 years, which was great. Like that's not a bad place to be stuck. He was an in-demand entrepreneur. He was great at what he did. But the thing is it plateaued because he was still an expert in a sea of experts. People weren't necessarily coming to him for his work, right? It wasn't something hadn't created something so unique, so different that it would just, people flocked to it. They were magnetized to it. Something that was unique and different. And then he came through the program and he created Love, Grow, Serve. And the very next year had gone to $4 million plus because he had moved into that new generation of mastery. He really understood his craft so well that he was able to talk, communicate, and create stuff that people haven't created before. And so when you're the in-demand entrepreneur, again, a lot of people will stay there. Like there's nothing wrong with being at any of these levels, but you just have to realize like there's more. Like there's, no matter what level you're at, whether it's the unheard, the seen, the heard, the traction, or the in-demand entrepreneur, there's always going to be one more level. And the sixth and final level, which by the way, when we go through our series, we're just going to go through the top 5 and you'll understand why in a second. When you have new generation mastery, when you are that new generation mastery entrepreneur, you have attained that. You are scaling sales consistently. People are coming to you for your unique method, teaching, and work. And what I say is when you have mastery comes from discovering things that other people haven't discovered yet And when you discover things that people haven't discovered yet, that means you can teach things that people haven't taught yet. So the reason why when I talk and I teach and I communicate and I do podcast episodes, why everyone, like you, I'm assuming you probably feel like it's fresh, it's different, it's a unique approach. Why? It's because I created it. I'm not regurgitating people's information. This is my unique IP. This is my intellectual property, much like the person who created NLP. NLP didn't exist before he created it. I think it was, Robert Bantler or something like that. I don't know. I'm totally messing up his name, but anyways, he had a mastery over his craft, and he created, NLP because of his craft. He created something new. Why? Because he was discovering new things. He put in the work. It was his purpose, his dharma. He was in alignment. He was looking for ways to improve things. He was looking for things that were outdated, and he was able to create NLP, which is now a standard. So when you are at that level, you're focusing on your own work. You're actually not just renaming things and trying to rename stuff. You're actually discovering things that people haven't discovered, right? Like thought reversals is a perfect example. Like I started to realize thought reversals was a concept that worked really well. It helped remove beliefs, but no one had created it. No one had realized it. No one had thought of it. And so I discovered, hey, there's this new type of content. There's this new perspective shifting formula. I'm going to create this thing called thought reversals, and they're becoming a standard in the space. And that's the thing, is when you have new generation mastery and you've moved out of the in-demand entrepreneur, what you have done is you've created new standards inside of your space. You have mastery over your craft, which means you literally change your industry or your niche, or you're creating a brand new one. And that's what I look at when I look at like what I'm doing here. I don't look at this as like, okay, I'm just going to name something different. I'm going to have some unique philosophy. I'm going to use the same pillars as someone else, but I'm just going to give it a different name when I create my methodology. Like, no. I'm looking at what is missing, what is wrong inside of the space, what is normal that is actually, people think is normal, that is actually causing pain and suffering. How do I go deeper than everyone else? Like when people say things like, just build the know, like, and trust. And that's what they do in a video. They say things like how to get people to connect with you. Okay, you need to build the know, the like, and the trust. And they stop at that and they don't explain how know, like, and trust is actually developed. I look at that and go, there's an opportunity there to figure out the psychology of how know, like, and trust are actually developed. And I go, if I can discover that, that means, and no one else has discovered it, because I haven't heard anyone talk about how to build the know, like, and trust. Everyone just says so surface level, and they're like, just build the know, like, and trust. There's, again, regurgitating. And if I go and I dig down deep and I discover and I test and I try and I put out content, I put out messaging that is designed to build know, like, and trust, and I finally uncover what it is, like, and I'm treating it like a science experiment, and I discover this is how know, like, and trust is built, I know, like, great, I'm going to be able to teach something that no one else is teaching. That puts me in a completely different space. I'm creating new standards within my space. And that's why we're leading the space. There might be people out there that know messaging better than me. I don't follow a lot of people that teach messaging. Actually, I don't follow anyone who teaches messaging because I don't want that to influence what I'm creating, even on a subconscious level. But from what I hear from other people, no one talks about messaging in the way that we do. Why? Because of what I just explained. I am looking and trying to discover things that haven't been discovered. I'm looking at what everyone else is saying and going deeper than they can. And I go deeper than they can because I have so much more experience. I have more knowing than they do. I put things into action. I have a higher foundation. I'm learning, I'm testing, I'm tweaking, and I'm discovering. And then when I discover, I then teach what I discover. And that, to me, that is what mastery is. It's a continuation to go deeper and to discover and create unique IP, unique methodologies, unique teachings that I can then give to you guys. But when I do that and I'm going deeper and discovering things that others aren't discovering, my messaging is completely unique. It's completely different. I'm in my own space. I have some level of mastery over what I'm doing. And I don't think a lot of people take a focus of mastery when it comes to messaging. And you might be sitting there going like, Brandon, I'm just starting out. I don't have any mastery yet. That's fine. Even if you have 1% more mastery than 99% of your space, that's it. This episode isn't designed to get you to freak out about not having mastery. This is for you to move your focus to getting more mastery, moving up from unheard entrepreneur to the seen entrepreneur, to the heard entrepreneur, to the traction entrepreneur, to the in-demand entrepreneur, and finally obtaining new generation mastery. But here's the thing. Just like I said, mastery and messaging is something that continues to evolve. When you have mastery over your craft and you are at that level of new generation mastery, your content's unique. Like the people like Simon Sinek and Brené Brown and Mel Robbins, they all have mastery over their craft, which is why they're able to communicate things deeper and more specifically than everyone else. They have that. But it doesn't last. And that's the trick here, is when you are the thought leader, when you are pushing the space, when you're communicating deeper than everyone else, you understand and you're teaching things differently than everyone else, those become standards. NLP is a standard now. When it was first created, it was like probably mind-blowing. Bantler, that's what his name. Bantler, Richard Bantler, I think is what NLP. I know some of you guys are probably screaming at the episode, just going like, you're an idiot, Brandon. It's X, Y, and Z. But no, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So when you have mastery, it becomes a standard. NLP was a standard. It is a standard now. And I'm always reminded of the story of Netflix. And you may have heard me tell this story, but like Netflix started out as a DVD company, which was a failing business model. Then because they had mastery over their craft and of the industry, they saw that they were able to discover that the trend was like online. So then they built their online streaming platform and they were leading the space. They were the only ones with like an online streaming platform. They had mastery over their craft. But then Hulu came out, and then Disney Plus came out, and then Prime Video came out, and Apple TV came out. Like all these companies came out, and everyone now has their own streaming platform. So it became the norm, it became the standard. So then Netflix started to run into problems, and they only discovered these problems because they kept moving forward. They kept putting things into action. They were discovering and evolving and growing. And then they discovered they had a distribution problem. So they were at the mercy of who was going to give them a license, who wasn't. So what did they do? They created their own production company. So now Netflix is essentially a production company. They have movies that go in theaters. They have their own originals that they have complete control over, licensing wise. But they only discovered that because of their level of mastery, their foundation and where their thinking was. Their foundation of where their mind was operating from is now higher and higher and higher. They weren't thinking from a place of like, okay, let's put it this way. When they were at the DVD level, they had a certain level of thinking. Now, when they're at the streaming level, their level of thinking has gone higher. They know more. They're thinking from a different place, which allows them to see things that others can't see. So for me with messaging, I'm always trying to raise my awareness. I'm always trying to raise my foundation. I'm always trying to raise my thinking mind, like where my mind is thinking from. And because Netflix has gone through all this experience, they have a level of mastery, they have more knowing, they can think differently than everyone else. They can see things that others can't see. So they became a production company. When Netflix first started, they didn't know that they were going to be a production company. They just wanted to be a DVD rental company. But because of a level of mastery, because of a focus on evolution, on a focus of growing, they have been leading the space. But as they lead the space, the things they discover become norms. So if you get comfortable, you're like, cool, I've hit that new generation mastery level that Brandon's talking about. I'm good. You're only going to be good for a few years until those become the standards. Like right now, thought reversal is becoming a standard. I literally know of people that teach thought reversals inside of their programs, which is cool. I love that. Why? Because it's teachings. I just want my teachings to get out to the world. And they're taking my teachings, but it's becoming a standard. So I'm always looking to evolve and to grow and to go deeper and to continue going deeper so that I continue to raise the standard within my space. And when you have new generation mastery, which is the goal, you literally get to mold the world in which people live in. Like I'm looking at messaging and content, and I look at this as like I'm molding the standards and the world for online business owners of how they can create content. I am literally shifting what they feel like they're allowed to say, how they're feeling about what they say, I'm helping them discover new things. I'm molding and changing the space in which online business owners live in because I have mastery. So this whole pyramid doesn't stop. Like, we want to move up the ladder, but even when you're at the top, you have to like keep yourself at the top. It's a cycle that you're like on a hamster wheel when you're at the top. It's a never ending game until you retire. Much like I said, personal development is a never ending game until you just decide to not do it anymore or you die. You leave this planet. Mastery is the same thing. You keep on getting more mastery and evolving yourself until you either retire or you die. And that's where we want to do, is we want to move up those phases, but we want to make sure we land on the new generation mastery level, but we stay there. And the people that see the fastest and the best results with messaging from our experience are the ones who focus on mastery of their craft, and they stay there. Those are the ones leading the space and having the highest level of messaging. So what I want to do is we're going to wrap up this episode, and coming soon, we're going to have a series of podcast episodes, little short ones that are going to go deeper into each level, the first 5 levels, not the mastery level, but the first 5 levels. So you can identify where you're at and why you're there and how to get out of that phase. Because that's what I want for all of you guys. And that's what our program is designed to do. Our program is designed to move you from level to level to level. And sometimes I've seen people go from an unheard entrepreneur to in-demand entrepreneur within a year. Sometimes it takes a few years. But the thing is in order to move up those levels, you're going to need a mentor. And a mentor, generally someone who has mastery over their craft, someone who not only knows one solution, but 10 different solutions. And I want to be that mentor with you inside of our program and through the next series of podcast episodes. Because the thing is you can only think from a place you know. So if you're going to have a mentor, you're going to want one who speaks from the knowing, who's actually done it, not only done it once, but done it 10,000 times. So they know the best way for you to move out of it. And that's what these next couple of podcast episodes are going to be. I'm going to be your messaging mentor. So with that said, if you have not left us a review on iTunes, please do that now. Let me know what you like the most about our podcast. Do you like more of the interviews, the stories, the messaging stuff, personal development stuff? Let me know so we can give you more of it. And stay tuned because that series is coming. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Hey, guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.